Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another jam-packed daily cryptocurrency market update. I'm wishing you all a fabulous Friday. And as always, we have quite a lot to get into, despite what is quite a lackluster time in the cryptocurrency space in regards to interest. We're going to be showing you interest. We've been speaking about interest in crypto, retail participation, which is pretty much non-existent, except for me and you guys that I honestly believe are interested at the perfect time. You don't want to be interested in this market when everybody else is. You want to be a part of being interested in this market when everybody else is, but you want to position before the herd arrives. And we can see, despite the lack of interest, which we're going to be looking at, and we've done lots of looking at on this show already, we see institutional adoption of Bitcoin ETFs surging by 27% in Q2. We also know via a number of different metrics that institutions have been accumulating, while retail at the moment largely isn't interested. And I think there's a lot of things baked into that cake. Of course, the price action is a big factor. But also, you do have seasonality in markets. We are still in what is typically a lull period for the markets. We are going to be showing you that in regards to gas fees. So Ethereum gas fees, when the Ethereum chain is being used and there's lots of interaction, gas fees are high. They're at a very low point. In fact, a 2020 style low point. Also, the Bitcoin funding rate is at a year-to-date low. And of course, we'll take a look at Google Trends, but we'll be zooming out and looking at the BLX, which is the Brave New Liquid Coin Index, and showing you actually this is very normal. We're not seeing anything out of the realms of normality, except for institutional involvement, which has pushed Bitcoin to highs pre-halving. We've been showing you the BLX and showing where Bitcoin typically is around the halving and where altcoins are. And they're there today, ladies and gentlemen, and still, I believe, have this amazing upside ahead of them. We'll be diving over to the Bitcoin chart, very much lulling around. And then we're going to be talking about how Stuart Aldultry, who is the chief legal officer over at Ripple, actually believes that the SEC is likely to appeal the verdict that we had just the other week. So without further ado, let's dive into it. And let's start things off with some good news before we introduce what I don't think is bad news. I think on the surface it is in regards to no interest in crypto right now. But I think actually the real silver lining here is that exactly that, right? You guys are getting into assets potentially at a time where the masses generally haven't, but technically they all seem to be sort of basing, and we've got this great picture forming ahead of us in regards to sort of macro, whether that be global liquidity, whether that be the direction of the Dixie, whether that be interest, also coupled with a sort of a technical position or a technical part of a market cycle that sees you really at the perfect position. So institutional adoption of Bitcoin ETFs surges 27% in Q2. Increased institutional ETF adoption could bolster Bitcoin's price to new all-time highs. And you can see this is saying institutional adoption of Bitcoin grew over 27% during the second quarter of 2024. Over 262 new firms have invested in spot Bitcoin ETFs, according to this analytics over at K33 Research. So you can see this, of course, is what is taking place. Retail investors still hold the majority of Bitcoin, but institutions are very quickly creeping up, and everybody has come out of the woodworks, all the largest institutions in the US, Europe, across the world, and really declared a Bitcoin position. We're likely going to see Ethereum positions taken, and then we're going to see further altcoin positions taken, certainly as they start to take hold. So you've got this kind of point in regards to the markets where we've kind of based. Bitcoin is elevated, but the general sort of altcoin market is still very much basing a phase one, moving, I think, into phase two. And that's typically where you have your smart money accumulating right here, right now, ultimately ready for public participation. Anybody that's familiar with Dow's theory or Wyckoff's market cycles or Stan Weinstein's four-stage analysis will be familiar with how that kind of goes. There's a kind of Wall Street cheat sheet disbelief phase, I believe, taking place. So we do have lots of confirmation. We've been looking at it across the board in regards to institutional interest at the moment when retail generally isn't. This is a Ethereum gas fee chart. So gas fees are the fees you pay to use the network. Fees go up in a kind of very free market manner when there's a lot of public participation, or when the chain is being used. You can see where it currently is today, ladies and gentlemen. It's at kind of the bottom of the market lows, similar kind of positioning to 2020. The price obviously isn't reflective of 2020's prices. It's significantly elevated. And the kind of take that I think some analysts are giving on this is actually this is quite a good place to build upon. So this is a good place, a historically bullish area where you've got that little public participation. Just like with many patterns, you have this restriction of volatility, low interest, and then you get this expansion, which I think is really going to kick many altcoins into their sort of phase two. We also know that the Bitcoin funding rate hit a year-to-date low. Bearish trends loom. This is from a cryptocurrency. So the funding rate really is essentially where you start to move sort of negative from a positive funding rate to a negative funding rate, meaning there's very little public participation. So this is a funding rate at a negative, means that shorts are essentially more in favor. This is one of the first times that this happened in a little while. But typically this, again, can flip very, very quickly. And really what this is showing is a real lack of participation. And also my favorite is Google Trends. Google is the largest search engine in the world. It's typically where retail go to get crypto information. And you can see just where we are in regards to this. There's very little participation. This is typically, what sort of takes place. If you look at where we are in relation to the halving, you can see that Bitcoin usually lulls around this period. You've got seasonality. The halving usually kicks off around about the same sort of seasonal point. Seller may come back in St. Leger's Day. Towards the back end of the year, you're really going to see this kind of restriction into an expansion of interest that I think is going to push many of the altcoin markets extremely aggressively to the upside, certainly more so than Bitcoin. I think that's going to align with Bitcoin dominance rolling. Bitcoin is really the tide that rises and sinks all ships. Its pullback that it's had, altcoins have just given way to. But when we look at this sort of altcoin market more broadly, we'll talk about Bitcoin in just a second, and we'll use the total three. Let's take Bitcoin and Ethereum out of it. It's not in a bad position at all. This is your accumulation. This has been pumped up by, or certainly above its sort of phase one base with the likes of Solana, some of these products that we know have seen institutional inflows. But generally, it's in an absolutely great position, ready for, the sort of upside that we've seen previously. So crypto right now, I think, is suffering from a real lack of interest. It is, in my opinion, very much in what is akin to this spot over here or this spot over here. And we still have this sort of amazing time ahead of us that is confirmed technically when we look at things. That's confirmed from the macro, which aligns with technically when we look at things. It's just a case of having the patience and allowing that to play out. I really do think, we've got an amazing sort of second half of the year ahead of us. We're just going through a bit of a lull that we can see in regards to a lack of public participation. The anomaly, of course, is that Bitcoin is still very elevated from where it typically is around a halving or post a halving. This has everything to do with institutions. They're here, they're accumulating, and they're ultimately typically the first people through the door. And you want to follow the money, the smart money, so to speak. So what I want to do now, guys, is actually finish things off with a very quick clip of Stuart Aldultry, who is the Chief Legal Officer over at Ripple, giving his opinion on the XRP ruling and the fact the SEC is perhaps likely to appeal. Before I do that, I want to dive over to an XRP chart. Now, we aren't one of these people that's just been mindlessly sort of talking about XRP. We're talking about it because of the technical significance of where it's currently at and what we believe is ultimately to come. So we can get rid of the Fed funds right here. I don't know why we've got that on. But ultimately, we have an $18 or $19.27 price prediction for XRP. We're very much expecting a repeat of what led in, or a 2017 style rally to come off the back end of this. Not going to be to the same percentage. I've seen people just overlay this here. There's a whole reasoning to why that perhaps isn't the case. Ultimately, you're here, I believe, and you're going to have this expansion take place. There's lots of fundamental reasons to expect XRP to have a rally such as this, and certainly technically that's signaled. Let's now dive over to Stuart Aldultry talking about the recent implications of the SEC or the judge's rulings and what he believes the SEC's next move now is. So let's dive over to that.
Nothing in this case advances the core mission of the SEC. But we all know that when it comes to crypto, the SEC has proven itself not to be rational. In fact, the court, in our case, criticized the SEC for engaging in litigation gamesmanship and tactics rather than faithfully applying the law. So I wouldn't be surprised if the SEC does appeal, but I'll say a couple of things. Number one, and I think this is important for folks to appreciate and understand, XRP's status as not a security and the secondary market trading of XRP as not security transactions, that is the law of the land, and that does not change even if the SEC appeals. And I would ask everyone to focus on that.
It's a very interesting sort of updated take there from Stuart Adultery. I don't think it matters which way. I know a lot of people are very polarized when it comes to XRP. I happen to think it's going to do very well, and I've got a position in it. It's not your thing. It's not your thing. So that's it from me, really, guys. Very lackluster time. Despite that, we do see institutional interest and an increased share being taken, or an increased position being taken from them. I truly do think now is the perfect time, ladies and gentlemen, to be interested in the crypto space. Even though it might not seem like it, now is all about refining your portfolio, getting ready for that upside, and ultimately battle testing it and really doubling down. I believe, this is the perfect time to be doubling down on the cryptocurrency space, in my opinion. Certainly from a educating yourself about it point of view. I'm currently reading a book from Norbert Wiener called Cybernetics. It's truly fascinating, the world that we're moving towards, and blockchains solve many of the problems that the world is currently facing in regards to moving towards perhaps a singularity. So that's it from me. We're going to do a video on that, actually. Very interesting topic. And on that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Have a fantastic Friday, guys. Enjoy the downtime in the markets, and I'll see you all in the next YouTube video. Thanks for watching, ladies and gents. See you in the next.